Hi everyone, welcome to Joshiverse. This is us talking about career insights, and it is an amazing episode to have Emmanuel on board, where he'll be talking about his experience of becoming a project manager. I always confuse those two words. Becoming a project manager, and we're just going to have conversations around how he managed to get here, what he had to do, what kind of experiences he has. And trust me, he has a lot of things to share. So if you're looking to get started in project management, this episode is for you. And I would love it for you to just hang around to the end and hear everything Emmanuel has to say. Without any further ado, I would hand over to you, Emmanuel. Welcome to the show. How are you feeling today?
Yeah, very fine. Thank you. Thank you for having me around. Thank you a lot.
It's great to have you around. And
Yes.
I would just want you to sort of introduce yourself, who you are, what you do, and a fun fact, something we can laugh about.
My name is Holawale Emmanuel Fashakin. I'm from Nigeria. I'm a project manager uh, at the Welcome Sangha Institute. I work in the scientific operations. My team is change delivery team. We work on a lot of scientific projects and so not just scientific projects, also we land instruments, we retire instruments, quite a number of things there. But prior to that, I've worked in many other industries as well. I've worked in construction, in manufacturing, pharmaceutical, and small stints in IT. So I've traveled a bit around those places doing project management work. So that's just a brief about me.
Ah, thank you so much. That's interesting. And for the fun fact bit, I will not let that go. So if you're not working, what do you generally do? What are you more
So
interested
what
in?
fun facts can I tell people? Okay, yeah. So for people who know the uh, liquid is this liquid detergent in Nigeria from Unilever Sunlight. Yes, the liquid Sunlight. Yeah, I was the one that oversaw the production of the whole production process from right from conception state till the final product going into the market. I was
Wow.
fully involved in that with Unilever. So
Wow.
yeah, if you've seen or used Sunlight detergent, the liquid one, yeah,
Yeah.
that's my baby. That's one of my jobs.
Wow. One of your brainchild. That's amazing.
Yeah, so, so I was involved a lot in it, a lot in the project, but much more involved during the construction phase. But prior to that, some of the works that goes underneath in terms of EPC and stuffs like that, yes, I was fully involved.
Wow. That's amazing. You've had your hands full in the past.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. Do you find time to do other things like play football, do
Yeah,
something?
yeah. So I try to find time. It's difficult as a project manager to find time for things outside, except especially if you're someone that likes to get your hand dirty, you like to get
Mm,
involved in a lot of things. Prior to moving to the UK, while working in Nigeria or some other parts of Africa, I usually work 6 days a week. It means I work from Monday till Saturday. So usually have time from Saturday evening and then Sunday to relax and rest. So not much of time to do anything else, but
mm,
I always make sure I have chance or time to do things like sometimes play football, sometimes go swimming, sometimes go to attraction places like Ikogusi,
mm.
Rejesha, some
Yeah.
of those places. I just find time to have fun. It's
Wow.
always good as well.
Wow, that's oh dear. You spend 6 days in a week working. I just can't get past that. How do
Yeah,
you
so
manage? How did you manage that?
yeah, so as a project manager, if you've been involved in construction works, jobs in Nigeria, um, there is hardly a way for you to escape working from Monday to till Saturday. So
Ah,
it's like embedded in the system, in the
yeah.
in the fabric. So and your mind is set at it, you don't really see it. Your own weekend starts on Saturday, really, not from Friday. So it's part of the what because I trained, I didn't just become a project manager all of a sudden. I
Yeah.
started from assistant project engineer and grew into that um, responsibility. So it kind of like became the norm for me. So,
Mm.
but right now I just work 5 days a week. That's it.
Yeah, because I was just going to ask you, what's the difference between you working as a project manager in Nigeria and working as a we are going to get to the point of talking about your experience and how you got your job here, but in the interest of what you've just mentioned, what's like the major differences in terms of working in Nigeria as a project manager and working in the UK as a project manager?
Yeah, so they're more or less like worlds apart, right?
Mm,
In terms of whatever points you want to pick, they are like very different. The connection points will just be the basic project management experience, the project management skills
mm,
that has been developed. It's useful everywhere in the world. You can't throw that away. So the project management skills, communication, leadership, innovation. When you're talking about risks, assessments, you're talking about issues dependent. All those things are the same for project management everywhere.
right.
Maybe the use or application may differ, but you meet that in all project management. But when you talk about the day-to-day activities or the environment or the
Hmm.
way things are, they are worlds apart, completely worlds apart. So for example, in Nigeria, it's expected. Okay, for when I grew to become a project manager in Nigeria,
Yeah.
I have a lot of, I have project manager engineers under me,
Mm,
working and reporting to me, and then, working with them, trying to steer the project in the right direction, get to resolve issues,
yeah.
uh, deliver on expectations.
Hmm.
Here, it's slightly different because then you don't really have much people reporting to you, which is number one thing. And even when you have people reporting to you in a way on a project, it's not hierarchical in some ways. So
Hmm.
it can be like flat relationship even
Yeah.
when they report to you. I believe you understand what I'm talking about.
Collaborative, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so it's more or less
Right,
like collaboration.
rather than
Yeah,
instructing and saying this is what
rather
you
than
do.
instructing. Yeah, but you're not anyone's boss as such,
Hmm.
except you're a line manager. It's sort of like flat relationship, and it's more of collaboration, and which happens in Nigeria as well. But the hierarchy is there, and
Mm,
the difference is there. So they have a bit of similarities in the processes, the actual job itself, and collaboration, how things happen, they differ a
yeah.
lot. So when you can find the similarities, you can also find a lot of differences
Differences. Wow.
between them. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, you in your initial conversation that we've just had about you being a project manager in Nigeria and
Yeah.
working 6 times or 6 days a week and all that, I think in general there is a hard part to project management, which is trying to find the work-life balance because usually projects have timelines, they are time
Yeah.
bound, and you need to meet up. Would you say the work-life balance is better off in the UK in your current job compared to your experiences, or are there similarities, or what are the differences between those two worlds that are apart?
Yes, so in their own rights, each of them have their pros and cons.
Mm,
And Well, it will be a bit harsh to compare them, but I will do the comparison. In terms of work-life balance, here in the UK, it is better when you look at the parameters that you would normally look at for
Mm,
work-life balance. You work some days, like currently I work 2 days from in the office, 3 days from home. It
wow.
gives a bit of flexibility in terms of what I can do. It does not
Yeah.
mean that I'm doing less by working from
Mm,
home. No,
yeah. Yeah.
actually, I actually do more working
Yes.
from home because I wake up early, get in front of the system, and you start doing a lot,
Yes.
compared to if I go to work. Usually, I don't really get distracted with working from home in the UK. So once I sit at the system, except I want to go ease myself
Yeah.
or
It's
find
good.
something to munch on,
Yeah.
you keep working. But if it's in the office, you sit like for like 30 minutes, you stand up, you went somewhere,
You
there
meet
would always
people.
be a lot of things to do. Yeah, so in terms of like in Nigeria, even though we work 6 days a week, we
Yeah.
find time to have fun. And I
Oh.
didn't mention this earlier, but in some of the projects, because the projects in Nigeria were the timelines were very, very strict.
Wow.
And you have a lot of things that you need to overcome. As a matter of fact, the possibility of you meeting the deadline is very slim. So
Mm.
you're under pressure from day one.
Oh boy.
And so in order to be able to cope with all of these demands, we found a way, to also have fun and enjoy life.
In
Sometimes
between.
on some of my projects, for example, after completing the day's work, we have a space for
Ah.
barbecue
Oh.
and drinks. For example, when I worked in on capacity expansion project at Guinness or by Lagos, we used to have, after the day's work, there is a bar for senior people in project, and
Colleagues.
there
Yeah.
is another one for general. And in both places, you would have suya, you have a lot of music going on, you have free drinks.
Wow.
So
Okay.
people have time to relax after the day's hectic
Unwind.
work. And yeah, so when you get back to your hotel, you just kind of like rewind and rest, and then be ready for the following day. Even though you don't have too much time for a lot of things, you still have time for basic things. You have time
Mm-hmm.
to relax, being in a relaxed atmosphere, listening to a nice music, just
Mm.
sometimes shaking your head or just being there. So they have their own differences, their own peculiarities. One takes a lot of your time, but you also have time to do some other things. One gives you a bit more of time, but you also spend part of the time to make sure you're on top of your game. So in
Yes.
both situations, in their own context, they have the pros and cons. But when
Mm.
you compare UK, my current job, to what I've done before, I'd say yes, I have more time in the UK. That's not due to doing less in any way.
Yeah.
It's more about how the job has been structured.
Yes.
So you're not really overwhelmed, and the timeline has been spread out for you in such a way that you can actually cope
Yeah.
with your work demands.
That's fantastic. I agree with you, and I think there are other things that play as well, because there are a lot of environmental factors that come into play when you're
Yeah,
looking at timelines for project delivery. Right.
yeah,
Sometimes you could be, if you could try working from home in Nigeria, and because of power outage, it
yeah,
becomes a frustrating experience. You have to worry
yeah,
about the power, and if you're doing a project that is afar off from your home, you cannot
yeah,
literally go from home to there. You need to book a hotel, you need to consider all of these logistics, because the road could
yeah,
be bad in some cases. Some places the road is good, but you feel like the distance is quite a long one, and you don't want to keep commuting, maybe traffic and all that. So some of these environmental factoral, the environmental differences could
yeah,
make it seem as though you are doing less, but it just shows that there's a bit more of efficiency in one setting over the other. And so, yeah,
yeah.
I totally understand what you're trying to
And I
communicate
can
right there.
Yeah, and I can speak a little, to a bit to that in the sense that here in the UK, for example, some of the projects we do, I have people working on them, and those people, I don't need to babysit them, I don't need to watch
Mm,
them, which is different to what is obtainable in maybe Nigeria, for example, where you have to go to work every day. Sometimes you have to go around. My daily activities on some of those projects is crazy. So once you get into the work, do some things, you need to go around at least maybe twice a day to
Wow.
see everyone is doing what they're supposed to be doing. Now, that is completely different to here, where everybody knows what they need to do. You all agree on what needs to be done.
Yeah.
If, for example, if for any reason they are unable to do what they need to do, they get back to you. They don't
Mm.
wait for you to come meet them. Once they are stuck, they get back to you. If there is any issue, they get back to you. So some of the activities can be done remotely here.
Yep.
Meanwhile, in Nigeria, because of the nature of maybe people, their attitude to work and stuff like that, it's difficult to outsource that physical presence for online.
Yeah.
So that is there.
I can imagine, and it's I think it goes both ways. Even in a general setting, people
Yeah,
who work from home tend to
yeah,
feel guilty, like, oh, I'm working from home, I need to do more. And then you tend to work way more from home than you would in the office. In the office, you get time to chit chat, your colleagues just walk to your desk, ask you
yeah,
a question that was supposed to be 5 minutes, and you end up spending 40 minutes just chatting randomly. But when
yeah,
you're at home and you do exactly the same thing, you will feel as though, oh, is it that I'm slacking? Am I wasting time? And then you tend to
yeah,
work even more. So I understand also there's the need for bias to action. People should have the better approach to work, being proactive, being self-driven, and taking initiative, which in
yeah.
some cases can be very different, considering
Absolutely.
the two different terrains. Some need some people need extensive supervision. You need to be
Yeah.
there to make sure they are doing
Mhm.
the work, whereas other people want to just they don't want to be micromanaged, in fact, and they have
Yeah.
the initiative to do stuff by themselves as long as you have a set goal that needs to be met. So yeah, I think that really makes so much sense. um
Yeah. Yes.
since we are now touching on expectations, because people that are listening are now getting a sense of what it looks like to work in the project management in the UK setting, what would you say are the moving components? In your initial talk about your experience, you mentioned
Yes.
working with project engineers. Um, what other components are there that you work with within the project management setting? Because I would just imagine everybody in the team are project managers,
Yeah.
but I'm guessing that's not the case. What other kind of people do you work with within the project team?
Yes. So initially, when I mentioned earlier, I said there are basic project management things, activities or skills or that are universal. Wherever you are in the world, they are there. You talk about skills and then talk about some of the processes. And whether when I was working in Nigeria or here right now in the UK, I have I work with different people. So there are stakeholders, for example,
Mm-hmm,
that I
mm-hmm.
work with in Nigeria and in the UK. So the stakeholders are very important. As a matter of fact, when you're doing your interview for project management, either as a project engineer or project manager or whatever, you get asked the question, you need to have very strong stakeholder management skills or
Yeah,
capability.
yeah,
So stakeholders in Nigeria involves a lot of people, the clients, a lot of people from client sides. If there are consultants on the job that you're doing, they are stakeholders. The guys that are working with you, or they are also stakeholders. I
yeah.
have project engineers, I have technicians, I have project supports,
Mm,
people who like accounts, project accountants. You have office, what they call it now, like office clerk,
oh,
all those
okay.
kind of things. So you have a lot of support functions as well. And
Mm,
then you have security where you're working are also,
mm,
stakeholders in all this. So stakeholders are part of it, not just the project engineers I'm working with. And
mm,
then you have, depending on where the project is taking place, because I'm trying to wrap my brain, it's different scenarios, right? When
yeah,
you're working on in a green field where there is just bush. You're just going from bush to a factory.
Hmm,
It's
yeah.
completely different when you're working in a brown field where the factory is existent. You're just installing or removing a part or upgrading a part of the
Hmm,
plant. So yeah, so there are a lot of things that come into play as well. So which is the same everywhere in the world, whether UK or Nigeria. So I
hmm,
get to work with a lot of people as a project manager. One of the important skills that you have to have is to have a very strong stakeholder management skill or capability, is to be able to communicate very well. You have to be a very good planner. You have to be innovative. You have to be very proactive. So all these things, whether you're in Nigeria, UK, Germany, US, wherever you are, South Africa or Kenya, anywhere, they are applicable everywhere. They are basic project management requirements. And so I apply them everywhere. Now, how you apply them differs.
hmm,
And that's some of the things that we touched on earlier, where if you're working with technicians or you're working with scientists or whoever
yeah.
you're working with, the difference between that I can pinpoint straight away between the jobs I've done in Nigeria or let's say parts of Africa and UK is the need for you not to really babysit or micromanage
Hmm,
people. People have know their responsibility here in the UK and oftentimes go ahead to do it. It doesn't mean they do it every time, but you don't really need to be on their neck to do it every single time.
yeah.
Maybe you need to give nudge once in a while,
Yeah.
but the natural inclination for them to do what is expected of them is there. Meanwhile, in Nigeria or some other parts of Africa, you really, really, really need to push people. You really need to, you know, keep clarifying what people need to achieve in a day,
Hmm,
which is one of the areas where I think we need to develop our professional capacity in Nigeria or Africa at large. We need to get to that point where people are able to do what is expected of them. This is not a criticism. This is what we all know happens, where people go ahead, just do what you need to do because it's your responsibility and you don't need anybody to tell you to do your job. Or otherwise, the correlation between the two, or the things that are the same similarities between the two, I've mentioned some of them earlier. You still need to do risk analysis. You need to
yeah.
do risk matrix. You need to discover what are the issues. You need to do dependencies. You cannot do a project without identifying what the dependencies are.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
all those are applicable everywhere, but the differences are also there in the attitude of people, in the settings, in the expectations and the deadlines, how much of work is being expected of you to do part
Yeah.
time or over a period of time versus what you can do. So
Yeah.
one involves a bit of reality, even when there is a lot of pressure. Uh, there is also a lot of support as well in the
Hmm.
UK. In Nigeria, yes, you have support, but sometimes it's not just enough.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's very dense. That's very dense. And I mean, you've mentioned two key points. One is the project. You have stakeholders in a project setting. You have people you need to work with, and so you need to
Yes.
be able to manage stakeholders. One of the episodes I did on how to product was how
Yes.
to deal with difficult stakeholders, and so we sort of talked about how it is more or less a thing about the situation most times, and there are certain times when it's just about a people problem. There are
Yes.
most times is, oh, there's a problem, let's sort it. It's not like the person is necessarily being difficult on purpose, but there are a few times and people just want to have their own opinions, or they have
Mhm.
their way of working and they are not willing to listen to how other people are working. So you need to be able to meet them on the side,
Yeah.
not head on, because then it will become a friction or a conflict. So I guess that's one major thing people need to look out for when they're trying to get into project management. And the other thing you mentioned is again the working culture across the different parts of the world, where some people are more self-driven, others are more expectant of you telling them exactly what they need to do every day and supervising them, breathing down their neck. And
Yeah,
to me, I feel like, we did mention something around the hierarchy being there, and
yeah,
I am the boss complex being at
yes,
play. I think when people are self driven, it becomes a threat to whoever is the boss. They feel like this person is taking too much initiative. There's something they call I too know,
yeah,
in the African setting. So you don't want to get into that place where your boss is always antagonistic against you because you're taking initiative to do stuff they've not asked you to, or you are doing stuff more than they have asked you to, which is what a lot of people are comfortable doing. Oh, let me explore. Just tell me what the goal is, and I'll explore best ways of achieving that goal.
yeah,
But in that kind of setting, the boss wants to tell you what the goal is and how to achieve it. So when you deviate, you begin to seem like a rebel, like you're telling them, okay, this their opinion doesn't really matter. So I think there is a lot of problem there fundamentally that needs to be addressed. One would be trying to flatten out the hierarchy so that people can be more collaborative. Because trust me,
yeah,
people are more open to collaboration than to directives generally. If you
mhm,
tell me what you think and ask me for my opinion, I will be happy that you are willing to hear me. And then when we rub minds together and we come up with something brilliant that is the plan, I feel as though that is my brainchild as well. So I will be willing to commit to it. I will be willing to go above and beyond to achieve it because we have come up with the plan together, rather than you just coming up and dumping the whole thing on my desk, saying this is all you need
absolutely,
to do. And so I start working halfway through it, I get demotivated, I get burnt out, I get stressed, and then
yeah,
I begin to slack, or my attitude towards it is just downstream. And so you
yeah,
need to come every now and then to supervise that I'm actually on top of the work you've assigned. So I think there's a
yeah,
lot of things going on there, but I wouldn't want to delve too much in there. But
in
really,
there.
thank you for sort of giving that expose to how you need to actually deal with being in that project space, working with different stakeholders, managing their expectations, meeting timelines, and understanding the pressure and
Yeah,
whatever risk are there. But I think this is going to be a better position for me to now ask you to sort of share your story, how you managed to move from being a project manager in Nigeria to being a project manager in the UK. What was the experience like doing that form of switch in context? Even though you're doing the same job, like you mentioned earlier, there are universal laws that apply to project management everywhere. But now you have switched context. You switched context within the Nigerian setting, and now you switched context not just in terms of the industry, because I know you've worked in construction and now you're doing science and research in genomics and all that. You've
yeah.
also switched your environmental context and cultural context. So maybe you could just
Yeah.
share your story in how that happened, why it happened, just so that whoever wants to do the same can have some inspiration to draw from.
Yes. So, well, my my change from moving from Nigeria to the UK involves a lot of, there is a lot of background story to that. I'm not going to go into that at all, but I will talk about once I was in the UK, still having my job back in Nigeria, I felt um, it would not be possible for me to shuttle between UK and Nigeria. And the reason is simple. It's the flight ticket was costing more and it was becoming unbearable when you think about the exchange rate. So
Yeah.
I made a decision. It was at the point where I thought, should I leave my family here, go back to Nigeria and just visit them once in a while, or should I stay here and visit home once in a while? Um, Myself being an adventurous person all my life, I like to think of myself being an adventurous person calculatively. So I made the decision to stay in the UK, look for a job. I did work briefly with an IT firm, and but my mind has always been in project management. I've done a bit of Scrum, a bit of Agile. I know Waterfall. I've done Waterfall all my life. I've done Agile, and it was time for me to explore the UK market and see what I can learn,
Yeah.
what I can contribute as well, and that was the point when I started looking for opportunities here and there. I started applying, I did my CV, um, did it for the UK market, because the way we do CV in UK is different from the way we do it in Nigeria.
Yeah.
So I did my CV for the UK market and started sending it out. I sent it out a lot, got very few people, people got back to me, and they do pre-interview, the way they do, and even fewer people got back to me after that. So, and then one thing I started finding out was certification was important to people here.
Wow.
Even when you talk about the principle, even when you talk about the things, it's sort of like, yeah, we need something to show you really know what you're talking about. So I decided enough was enough. I went for training. I did some trainings, went for the certifications, and added that to my CV. So adding the certifications to my CV changed a lot of things, because then when I sent out my CV, then I was getting more calls.
Okay.
And so the thing is that you send out your CV, let's say you send it out to 10 places. I'm just saying as theoretically now.
Yeah.
So send it out to 10 places. I'll probably get calls from 7, and the call is usually what you call like pre-interview calls. They just want to have a feel of who you are and what you do, and then maybe you get like 7. Then I started getting maybe like interview schedule for like 4 out of the 7, or sometimes 5 out of the 7. And then so I had a lot of interview laid out in front of me. But for people who would be listening and who are probably in the UK markets trying to explore the opportunity, or trying to apply, people who were in my shoes that time, here's what I did. After completing the certification and all, I will do application. I do a lot of application every day.
Wow.
And yeah, the possibility is for people to do a lot of one-click applications, on job sites. I don't want to start mentioning job site names, so there is tendency for you to do a lot of one-click applications. They are very good, not bad in themselves. You probably will have a lot of calls from them, but I took time out to really, really apply on the websites of companies that I really want to work for. That is time consuming.
Yeah.
So sometimes I do that overnight. Maybe I'm able to do 3 or 4 applications overnight if I'm very fast. Sometimes it's just 2 or 3. And I'm talking about spending hours doing those applications. So now, after completing the application, most times I get calls the following day.
Wow.
Sometimes it's 2 days after, because once your CV lands, I think it goes through the screening software.
Yeah.
If it comes out, that's when you can really get calls, and then they want to have a feel of what you know. And based on that, some will schedule interview for me. So I started getting interview upon interview. When I started having interview upon interview, it became difficult for me to keep applying and then answering calls, because sometimes I'm interview and my phone is buzzing, a lot of calls like that. So once I started having a lot of interviews, I started going from just one single interview stage to proceeding to the next interview stage, and then some will tell you their own stages is 2 or 3 interview stages and stuff like that. So that's one of the things and then along the line, I can't tell how many rejection emails I got. I mean, maybe more than. I don't want to discourage anyone, so I don't let me mention anything.
But I mean, you can be as honest as possible because people need to understand what to expect when they are trying to break into this market, which I think is the value from having this kind of conversations. If you had people that were in your shoes ahead of you and had told you all of the things you know now, it probably would have reduced the number of stress. Maybe like knowing to focus more on company website than actually going to one-click submission, knowing to be more tailored on your CV, making it to fit the UK market. Some of these tips are things that people would really need. So if you had 100 million rejections, it's fine. I have so much rejection. I don't know if anybody has more rejections than I have, but yeah, it's
Yeah,
fine.
until you meet other people. But here is the thing: looking for a job in UK or in Western world, it's a full-time job itself, and I like to tell that to people. And also learning to keep with rejection is an important ability to develop. You need to develop ability to understand the fact that you've been rejected like 100 times does not mean that there are 100 things wrong with you.
Yeah.
You're just not who they were looking for, and that is fine. I mean, we need to start understanding the fact that if you get a rejection, you just didn't feel fit what they want. It
What
does
they
not
want.
take anything away from what you know or what you have.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I did a lot of applications. I don't know, maybe more than 700, 800 applications. And a lot of them are one-click applications. But if I think about the ones I actually sat down to do on the company's website,
Yep.
those ones would be approaching maybe 100 or more than 100 of them as well. So it's a lot of work. I'm talking about something I did within 2 or less than 3 months. I did all those applications.
Wow.
And it's a lot. I dedicated my time to it, and I got more than, as you can imagine, I got more than 500 rejection emails, but some people are very lucky. They just do 1 or 2 applications and then they go through. Some people are like me who get a lot of rejections, but I don't ever give up. One, I know what I know.
Exactly.
I know my worth. I know my experience, and I've done a lot of interviews where, for example, there was an interview for a job. It was going to be like capacity expansion for a factory, which I've done. In fact, it's a capacity expansion project for a brewery here in the UK, and I was interviewed for 2 roles on that job. And when we got to a point, they said, okay, don't worry, we'll get back to you. We just want to contact someone to talk to you. And that person happens to know a lot about brewing process, and because we are going to be installing a lot of these equipments. And so when we started talking, we started talking, and he started asking me a lot of questions about some of the equipments, about some of the processes. And I was telling him one after the other what I know about them, what I've done on them. He was quite very, very impressed with what I know. So it's not a question of whether I know something or I don't know something. I've done a lot of work in brewing, in bottling companies, in companies like that do a lot of let me say FMCGs in Nigeria.
Yes.
I covered a lot of FMCGs in Nigeria, and I have a lot of experience with those consumer goods.
Yeah.
So when I was speaking to him, he knew.
He could feel it.
What I was talking about. So even though I didn't eventually pick up the role, there are a lot of things that went into that. Anyway, but, I know what I know. It's also very important that you, even if you know little, just understand that the little you know is also good enough.
Yeah.
And if you know a lot, understand that what you know, you know. So the rejection letter takes anything, or the rejection emails should not take anything away from what you know.
Yeah.
Now, what that should do to you is for you to start asking the questions, am I doing the right things? So I started asking myself the questions, am I answering the way I need to answer these people? It's easy to say, yeah, they just... One thing I found out shortly after after I started doing a lot of interviews was, these people, the time they spend to talk to me is valuable to them. So if they don't really need me, they would not go to that extent to want to talk to me. So
Absolutely.
Once I realized that, I knew that if I'm not getting called up after that, there might be one or two things that is missing. So I started
Mm.
learning that even when they ask me about, so tell us about yourself, for example, they've read about me, they knew my name, they've seen my CV, so they know a lot about me. So it's not just about me regurgitating what is already in my CV. It's also
Yeah.
about me giving, quality to what they've read, giving life to what they've read, and bringing what they've read on paper is like a story.
Mm.
So living that story at that moment so that they can see through what I'm telling them, what I've been through, what I've done, who I am. So I went from just answering questions like a robot to
Mm.
really, really start talking, responding to interview questions in a way that they didn't see me doing those things, but they can picture it
Mm.
and they can start relating to it. And when you are able to make your interviewer see things